So welcome to everyone to this afternoon's program with the Friends of Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. This is an extension of last year's Celebrating Malheur speaker series, which you can find the recordings for on our YouTube channel, and our account is Malheur Friends. And this afternoon's program is really exciting. We're super pumped to have tonight's guest. So we're extending the last year's speaker series, probably not going to be every month. It looks like the next one is going to be in March. We might be doing these every other month this year. So thank you for joining us and welcome, welcome. Go back. So the Friends of Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. I can assume if you're here that you know a little bit about our organization. We're established in 1999. I am Janelle Wicks, Executive Director for the last 6.5 or so years. And here's our contact information. You can learn more about our organization on our website. You could email us anytime. Our phone number has just changed. And you can always find us on social media, including Blue Sky, at Malheur Friends. Our mission is a commitment to promoting the appreciation and conservation of Malheur National Wildlife Refuge's cultural and natural resources. We do this through education, advocacy, and on-the-ground stewardship as an organization. We do this in service to Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, which is 187,000 acres of diverse habitat in eastern Oregon in the upper reaches of the Great Basin. This is territory that exists today, managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but exists today on what are the ancestral homelands of the Wada'tika Band of Northern Paiute. So we respect and honor their history and traditions that persist today on the landscape at Malheur and beyond throughout the region. So this afternoon's program is all about that. And we have with us Diane Teeman, who just finished her PhD program. So these are no longer the height of her education and expertise, and it goes much beyond formal education. Diane is the Director of Culture and Heritage with the Burns Paiute Tribe, and she's going to share some of that with us this afternoon. So we thank Diane for sharing her time and her knowledge with our organization and all of you. So Diane, without further ado, thank you for being here, and we are just thrilled to learn what you have to share with us.
Well, thank you very much, Janelle, and thank you to everyone that's online. I'm going to introduce myself in our formal traditional way, and then I also wanted to make sure I know how much time that I have to present.
Yes, about 30, 40 minutes, and you can feel comfortable taking whatever time you need.
Okay. All right, thank you. Ne Diane Teeman, minaniada ne Wada'tika newa I na gap Nelson Teeman, minania I bia gap Anita Joy Mario Minania no Wada'tika Noah Wadapakwit. So my name's Diane Teeman, and I identify as a member of the Wada'tika Band of Northern Paiute. And I introduced my parents. In a full traditional introduction, I would also go back 2 or 3 more generations, but I won't do that today, but I will share with you later on in the slideshow some of the importance of that. And Janelle, I imagine, will be keeping track if there's questions that come up. So feel free, Janelle, to let me know if there are questions so I don't get too far ahead and then need to return at any point. I probably won't be able to track the communications that come up myself very well.
I'll take care of it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course.
So I kept moving the slide. Now it's time to do it. It doesn't want to go. I think I got it there. Okay. So I introduced myself, and this is my community. I'll talk a little bit about our history, but this is a large number of the 12 extended families that returned to this basin after our internment out of state. And my great great grandfather is the gentleman seated in the front row, furthest to the left of the priest, who is Dr. Huell. My great great grandfather is Chief Peter Teeman. His tribal name is Pashigo, and he was the last living chief here at Burns Paiute. And then I have other family in here as well, but all of us here today at our tribe descend from the folks in this picture. So we talk about our culture and our history as being from since time immemorial, and that is, beyond calendar date. But archaeologists also working in the area have identified that there's evidence of human occupation in the northern Great Basin for at least the last 15,000 years. I've been involved in archaeology and cultural resource management for 36 years now, and that date has moved back several millennia during my time. At one point, at the beginning of the 20th century, archaeologists thought that, and anthropologists thought that people had been in the Americas for a very short amount of time. And so, as our time moves forward, we have further and further evidence of the antiquity of our people in the area. And although we do have some reservations about the way that heritage is looked at and treated, I do have to appreciate the fact that there's always additional evidence to support and move towards our assertion of being here since time immemorial. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the way our reality and our universe works. And I have some training in Western philosophy. So the word ontology, what is real, and epistemology, what we know and how we know it. I move back and forth between our traditional culture ways of knowing and Western academic ways of talking about things. So our ontology and epistemology is really wrapped into, in our language, what's called our manipunin. And if you ask somebody, like when I was young and we ask our elders, what is that? What does that mean? And they would say, it means the way that it is. And it's, not strictly translated as the way that it is. But what they meant is it's our unwritten laws, it's everything we know about reality. And so in my day job, working for the tribe, the elders have named the office that I work in our Manipuni Nobi, our Unwritten Laws House. And that's my responsibility as the Culture and Heritage Department Director, to be able to share the importance of the way that we know the world, and also to teach the young. We have a preschool, a language immersion preschool that we started 4 years ago. So we do a lot of education and outreach in our department as well. But within our Manipanin, some of the major tenets are that everything is alive. And I know in anthropology, oh, just gonna lose the term right now, but that everything has agency and everything has personhood as part of how we understand um, our universe. And so things like water and rocks and plants and animals, they all have personhood and they have equality with us as people. In fact, we understand that we were one of the last to be created, and the two brothers, Wolf and Coyote, actually were part of that whole creation that included us. And even the language that we speak is given to us by the animals. And there was a time when the animals and our people could speak the same language, but over time we lost that. We still communicate, but not through the use of our language in the same way. So it's a very different organization of reality from what you would learn in your typical Western contemporary culture, but our understanding is still very much alive and still very important. And I believe that it's because of our relationship with everything else in our ecosystem, with this understanding that we are not allowed to impose upon or have dominion over anything else. We have to give due right and consideration for everything else. Every time we take something, we have to give at least as much. We have to ask permission. There's interaction, conversation, sharing of songs, prayers, so on and so forth in our traditional culture, that allowed for as many people as were living in this area to live in relative balance with the ecosystem. And so that's what I'll share for now about the money puning. So we represent the survivors of bands that inhabited the northernmost portions of the Great Basin. And the Great Basin is defined hydrologically by all of the areas where water flows back into a basin and doesn't flow out to the ocean. But culturally, the Great Basin culture groups extend beyond that. So for our own people, we, are over as far as the Snake River Plain, over to Boise, over to the Cascades. So the John Day and the Deschutes and, all of those rivers that do flow out to the ocean are also part of our traditional use areas. And our traditional use areas overlap with other tribes, both related and unrelated to us. But that's a little bit of a difference between how Great Basin is defined, um, both hydrologically and culturally. And the other thing I want to share about maps, any maps you see on here, except for the Burns Paiutes officially approved legislative map, all of these maps are just relative representations. Um, you look at 10 different maps and there's 10 different areas that are outlined of, where people were. And this isn't meant to be a territorial assertion so much as just a visual representation of the areas, because we know as tribal people there was a lot of overlap. There weren't hard lines that people, didn't cross. The further you might get into another person's area, especially if they were culturally unrelated, then there might be difficulty. But these are just representations for our northern Paiute people. So the one on the left is an example from what is current day Oregon and where northern Paiute people were. I should also mention we're very closely related to Western Shoshone, and our language goes all the way to like Shemhuevi and Comanche, and is Uto-Aztecan, so all the way down into where Aztecan folks live. Our language has some shared understanding. But the map on the right is a map that was done in the early 20th century by cultural anthropologist Omer Stewart. And it shows many of the bands that were still identifiable at that point. I believe, and our elders have told us that there were more bands, there were more sub bands beyond this, but these are the primary bands. So the Wada'tika, the Wada Eaters, are up here at Malheur Basin, and that's our center wintering area. So Wadapa, which is what we call Malheur Lake, is where people, after they were out and about through all of the seasons of greater mobility, would come back and live together. And in fact, there would be thousands of people around the lake on any given winter. And it's named Wada. That's seepweed. And seepweed was prevalent around the lake at that time. And each of these bands is named after what is a predominant food source in the area. Most of them, anyway. There's a couple exceptions. But so the Yahuskin is one exception, being that I've been told they were originally the Wada'tika, which is the crawfish eaters, and later after contact started being referred to as the Yuhuskins, which is Yuhu, which is fat in Paiute, and then skin, the English word for it. And my understanding, what I was told, is that that came about because of the way that fat and soil would be mixed together and used as a mosquito repellent. And there's a lot of mosquitoes over in that other area. And then another example is the Wada'tika, which are down by Fort Bidwell, or Wada'tika, I'm sorry. Our northern bands have a tika at the end, and most of the bands that are further down into Nevada have a tikata at the end. So that explains a little bit about how our band distribution works. And I will go into marriage a little bit later, but each tribal member has a primary affiliation, but their parents may have been the same, or they may each have been from a different band. And then this is today our headquarters here in Burns. Just an example, and the other 8 federally recognized tribes in Oregon where they're located. So sorry, this is a little fuzzy. Whoops, what did I do there? I have another seasonal round that I'll show that's it's better after this. But this seasonal round was done by another cultural anthropologist, Marilyn Couture, who worked with our tribe in the 1970s through the 1990s. I'm still in communication with her. I'd love for her to come back and work with us again. But this was done to talk about where our people would go and what they would interact with at different times of the year. And I will, just because this is blurry, and I apologize, I thought I had fixed that, I'll move on to this version of our seasonal round. So this is one that was created by our department. And so I talked about how in the winter time people would be around the lake. They would come down into the lower elevations of the basin. But when springtime would come, they would head out up into the higher elevations where they would interact with our root plants. And different families have different directions they would go, would also depend on whether you were going to go visit relatives in another area. So some people would travel like all the way over to the Fort Hall area during the summer, might make it back by fall, might stay there over the winter and come back the next year. My grandma, of course, she had an old car as she was older, but even when she was younger, they had a wagon. Sometimes they'd go all the way down to southern Nevada and into northern Arizona. So our people travel a lot. And um, they did have a home base, but they would leave in the spring, and the first place they would go would be to procure uh, root plants. So we have root camp. And then after that, if they were going to stay in this general area, they would head up into the higher lands, like the forest. And this is in a clockwise fashion, basically the types of things people would be going after. So there were spring salmon runs around the time that we would be going after different types of roots. And then summer is, berry season. And then late summer is ideally when you're going after some bigger game. And then you get into fall when you're going after seeds of different kinds. And then, fall is still game. And then after the first snow is rabbit time. So right now we're just at the tail end of the time when we would normally be hunting jackrabbit, and there would be a primary food source that we would interact with. And unfortunately, we have all been lamenting how all of the bands and the people I interact with, how we don't have enough rabbit to subsist on right now. So we're talking about what we might be able to do to fix that. And actually here at Burns, Saturday, we're having a traditional round dance, and we'll be having a rabbit dance as part of that to pray for the rabbits to for their health and their wellness, and that they will come back to help us. So it's very much about making sure we're having those interactions with the other animals, because they give of themselves for us, and then we give of ourselves for them. And so traditional marriage as it relates to those bands. So anthropologists say we were banned exogamous, which is mostly true, and that's still the case here today. Of course, there are some people that have married outside of the tribe, but of those that marry within Northern Paiute bands, we have people that have ties to many of these other bands. And Chief Peter Teeman, that I had mentioned in the beginning, he actually identified as Tagu, which is a little bit east of us. And primarily the people that are at Duck Valley, I think many of them identify as Taga. So you're you would be one band, and then you could express who your father is and what band he was from, and your mother what band she was from, and go back a little ways. And so when you're traveling, this is super important, because you might come somewhere where nobody knows who you are, and when you introduce yourself, you're talking about who all your blood ties are going back some generations. And so somebody who is within the new group that you are meeting, they're going to be, oh, I know that person. I remember that person. They're tied to me. More often than not, that we find like distant relatives, because we have a common relative somewhere along the way. But this is how our tradition works. And anthropologists talk about the importance of that in environments that they call having patchy resources. So you have broad family ties. So if things aren't going well in your area, you can reach out to a relative and go stay with them for a while. And that's very true, even still today. So we have ties, and we ask each other, oh, how is the toishabui doing up there, the choke cherry, down here we had a frost and it all died, and but we've got some tuva we could share with you, some pine nuts, so we still trade and gift and all those kinds of things still today with what traditional foods that we do have access to, and it's super important. Reciprocity is very important between people, and then also, as I mentioned at the beginning in our manipunin, with the plants and animals and everything else. We all, in being a good person and doing good things, you do things in a reciprocal way, and you're always giving. The picture on the right is my great grandma. Got Dokta was her Nua Yadawana, her Paiute name, and her English name was Maggie Stanley Jim. She was Paiute and Shoshone. From Weiser, her Shoshone side comes from the Weiser area, the Sheep Mountain Eaters, and strangely enough, many years later, when we got federal recognition at Burns Paiute, she became 4/4 Paiute. And so that's one of the crazy aspects of politics, sociopolitics, I guess, in the way it changes our identities over time. And I could talk forever on that, but I'll stop there for now. So water and shelter when you're on the move is important. In the summertime, people would sometimes just sleep under the stars or put up a shade. And then in the wintertime, it's important to have something more sturdy. So these are our traditional, couple examples of traditional houses. People would use whatever materials that were nearby to be able to create them, and they were very sturdy. Sometimes people would also build like a windbreak out of materials that were close by. These are called a nowi in our language, our house, and anthropologists and others refer to them as wikiups. And then on the right, water is super important. Springs are, water and spring sources are sacred. They have their own personhood. One of our medicine people talks about how they also have guardian spirits there. And so it's important to interact with everything when you go to get water so that the water that you get is also part of that reciprocal relationship. But these jugs would be made out of plant material, and then resin would be used to put over the top, and then ash put on them to just really seal them up so they would be completely watertight. And the smaller ones would be for individuals maybe out on the hunt for a day, and then there were ones that were much larger for family groups to have. And then we used, cradle boards in English. We call them a hoop. And babies would have a temporary hoop right after they're born. In our Manipanin, we understand that newborns are between spiritual realms, and there's a lot of practices that happen for the first month of a child's birth. And during that early time, they have a hoop that's styled a little bit differently, looks more like a little boat. And then after the child is able to come out and be introduced to community, when they've fully come into this world spiritually, then they come out, meet community, and they would have a series of hoops that were bigger in size each time. And the picture I have on the left is an example. I know that baby in there is a little boy because of the design on his shade he has up on top. And so triangles and designs that touch all the way across are girls, and lines and designs that do not touch across indicates a gender of a boy. There are other genders, but primarily, like initially, this gender designation would be designed based on whatever the physical, sexual attributes of the child's body was. On the right is a picture of my oldest grandson. He's 13 now, and I put it in here because this hoop's pretty big. I think he was maybe almost 3, and he had outgrown the shade on there, so he was popping up over the top, but he was insisting on going in there because their kids really like these. It's a sense of comfort, and they will sometimes cry when they get older and they're walking. They'll bring you their hoop and want to, be in it. So his name's Arlen, and he's in his hoop, but he also wanted my smartphone. So I thought it was a funny picture showing the juxtaposition of one of our very traditional, most important practices, and him wanting that smartphone. So I talked a little bit about the importance of being a good person. We're taught to emulate the ants in our traditional culture. Ants have a lot of different important roles and interactions with us, but ants work together in a community, and they all give of themselves for the good of the whole. And that is really one of our major tenets in our traditional culture. You should never have to ask anyone for help because we should be observing each other. And if you see someone is struggling in some way, they should just offer the help. They should just start helping. They shouldn't, no one should have to be told. And this is one of the things that we're working to reintegrate back into our culture now, is that sense of duty to community and the importance of us all helping each other for the wellness of the whole. Being a hard worker is another thing about the ants that I know I was told is super important. And these pictures here, one of the reasons I also brought them to show is that we have responsibility to everything that's currently living, but we also have responsibility to ancestors, and we have responsibility to future generations. So when somebody passes to become an ancestor, there's many things that we need to do, and there are time frames they have to be done in order for them to pass correctly. They go to the other side of the Milky Way. A part of their spirit goes there, and there's four parts to their soul. And if we don't do everything that we need to do in the right way and the right time, it can jeopardize them, but it can also jeopardize us. And so this is probably, this series of understandings is probably one of the strongest that we have maintained through everything we've been through post contact. But one of the things that I note from these pictures here is that the women on the left have their hair cut, and the that is one of the things that's important when people are close to you. Always when it's your mother, but also if it's somebody that's very close, when they pass, it's important to cut your hair. And my family, our understanding is that is because of um, the the personal, physical, metaphysical energy you have. And we call it puha. And when someone's traveling, when that spirit is ready to travel, we do a lot of things to harness energy for them so they will have enough energy to make it on that long journey. And in cutting your hair, you're giving a good part of your personal energy towards that person to be able to make their journey well. But it's also we know it's a symbol of being in mourning. So typically, like we teach this in the schools and whatnot about, if our kids show up and their hair's cut, it's not usually a fashion statement. It's something much deeper. So, we tell the teachers to be aware. And then our traditional Northern Paiute clothing, this is a few examples. So up on the upright, that's a pico, that's a skirt, but there could be two of those. So one goes over around like your shoulders, and then another one goes around your middle, around your waist. And then some example of some of the woven shoes. And in the middle, this is got Agnes Holly Phillip. She's one of our elders. Was featured on a book, The First Oregonians, with a rabbit blanket she made, and they call it a burden basket in English that she has there. And the rabbits were centrally important for us too. So it gets very cold in the winter, and these rabbit blankets are super important for survival. Um, we had a very limited break, a few decade break in rabbit blanket making, but we started up making them again um 2 years ago, and we're continuing to make sure people know how to do that, because in our manipaning we understand that there will be a time when we need to have all of these skills again. So we're trying to make sure that our people are prepared, whether that time be in our lifetime or, thousands of years from now. We want to make sure our people are able to live off the land and interact with everything the way they're supposed to be. And then on the right is Sarah Winnemucca. Hopkins. She's probably one of the most famous, albeit some of our folks say infamous, people from our tribe, and she actually was Pyramid Lake, but she spent a lot of time up here in Oregon. I feel like I'm talking really slow and getting really close to my end of time, Janelle. How much time do I have left?
So the time that we leave remaining will just be for question and answer. So if you wanted to take another 10 minutes, that would be fine.
Okay. Okay, great. So, sociopolitics, we're egalitarian by traditional culture. Everyone is equal, and it's even so democracy, you get a vote, but in egalitarianism, everybody sits around and talks through whatever the decision is until everyone can live with the decision. And that can take a really long time sometimes. And it still was pretty strong in our community. The tribal council still practices consensus, decision making, but we have moved to a tribal council, and we have a constitution that it started with a template from the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. We adopted it in 1968 when we were required to as a condition of receiving federal recognition. So we currently have a 7-member tribal council that meets, and we have a general council that the tribal council reports to. We actually just had our semi-annual tribal council meeting last night, so I was up pretty late. And games and gambling are super important in our community. They still remain that way. So that's how a lot of exchange would happen too, if not for gifting. And then Peter Skeen Ogden is the first non-native to talk much about our folks here in the Malheur Basin. The thing that I want to share primarily about his recording of his interactions with us is he said when he came into the Malheur Basin, when he came around the lake, that there were so many people camped around the lake that we must surely be the largest nation in all of the Americas. And so I know that he said you couldn't walk, I can't remember if he used yards, but like 3 yards, 3 or 4 yards between nobis, between houses. There were that many people all around the lake when he came. And of course, Malheur, he is the one that coined that, and that was because they had been setting traps. They were trying to create a fur desert in the area to maintain political control, and our people went and stole and broke the traps. And Malheur means misfortune. So because of our people trying to keep him and his folks out, and the breaking and stealing of the traps, we ended up with the term Malheur now. And then we didn't have a lot of folks coming in. We had corporations that were here initially while the west side of the state was being homesteaded. It wasn't until much later. There's a lot of detail, that goes into that. Some of it I discuss in my dissertation, and there's some other references. If anyone's interested, I'm happy to pass along. And then we also underwent a several winter extermination campaign under General George Crook, who's on the left. Again, lots of reference material if anyone's interested more on that. And then this just quickly goes over, I won't read it all, but this goes over a series of major events that happened, leading to us being put into exile in Washington State in January of 1879. So January is now officially the month of remembrance and memorial to our ancestors who were forcibly marched as prisoners of war from Fort Harney, Oregon to Fort Simcoe, Washington. Some of them were continued to be marched to Vancouver Barracks by Vancouver, Washington to await trial, but we were all removed. And the 1.8 million acre reservation that we had for a time was returned to public domain during the time of our exile. And I bring this up because strangely enough, the treaty that we had initially, which was a treaty of peace and friendship, not a land cession treaty, is called Treaty with the Shoshone. And I bring it up because the federal government really didn't know at any given time, I don't think, who they were actually interacting with, at least in our instance. So it's kind of funny. And then my great grandma that I showed the picture of earlier, she, along with a woman named Minerva Teeman Susie, great grandmother, I believe, it was either grandmother or great grandmother, escaped from the internment camp in Washington and made their way back here to Oregon together when they were pretty young, adolescent, together. And other people escaped. Some went to Warm Springs, so the contingent of Paiute at Warm Springs are our people. And then some people escaped further down into Nevada. And then after 5 years, uh, just people left in mass from the internment camp, and they didn't stop them that time. And so they returned back to wherever they could find safety or wherever they had family and needed to be. There were 12 extended families that came back to this area. They were in Druzy originally for a while and then made their way back into the basin. And then we were here as a colony for many years, got federal recognition in 1968. The land that we bought, that was fee land for ourselves, was turned into our trust land for our current reservation. And I already talked about our constitution. This number has gone up a little bit. I'm sorry I didn't update it. I want to say it was up to 441 for a while. It might be down a little bit now. The little boy that was in the hoop earlier is in the red in this picture. He's almost 6 foot tall now, but that was when he was younger. And his little cousin's holding the other side. Those are some of our folks. I think when we got the building downtown that we're working on, they closed out near there. And we're just working as hard as we can to make sure we have a healthy community and make sure our language survives. And we are fortunate, we still have people who learn Paiute as their first language, but they're dwindling in numbers. And so we're trying to make sure that it doesn't go to sleep entirely. Our Tutitawaki Tishitabui, which is our little kids awakening preschool, they're being immersed in our language and our traditional culture. And so we're just fighting as hard as we can to make sure that we keep our manipunin and our traditional culture, our Noa Yadawan, our language, everything alive and increased wellness. That slide is old. I'm going to leave that off. And I've already talked about this, the work that we're doing. Sarah Winnemucca is actually one of the two statues. Every state in the Union has two statues in the Capitol, and Sarah Winnemucca was chosen to be one of the two figures that represents Nevada. And so there's a statue of her there, and that's it. We have lots of different legislation, and so I am guided in my day job by the Aboriginal Lands Protection Policy. That tells me how I engage. The Tribal Council has given me responsibility and authority to speak on behalf of the tribe on consultation for culture as we define it, which is pretty broadly defined. But that has helped us streamline how we do things and frees the tribal council up to do other important work that they need to do. They are the ultimate decision makers. So when I work with folks through consultation processes and agreements, I get it to a penultimate state and then it goes to council. And tribal cultural properties, these are just a few of them. So these are the types of places that we care about all of our land. These are a few of the places we hold in especially high esteem for various reasons. And I will stop there. So hopefully I still got a few minutes for Q&A if there are any.
Yes, Diane, thank you so much. Very punctual. Um, thank you for your time and for sharing all of that information with us. We do have a couple questions that have come through. One a very common question, which I'll leave to you to answer how you will. But someone has asked, was there any damage to Burns Paiute artifacts or land during the Bundy occupation?
Yes. So, wintertime, I talked about all of the people, the thousands of people that were around the lake every year for thousands of years. People all around the world typically pass during the winter more often. So we have many, many burials that we've worked with the refuge over the decades to try and protect. And during the occupation, that was a number one concern. It kept me up at night. A few times I remember just breaking down in tears about it because of the concerns, knowing the areas the way I do and some of the things that were happening there. And so we did work cooperatively with the FBI to help do inventory and talk through everything. Once the federal government got back control, and then we helped in some of the prosecution, efforts and whatnot as well. And we did some of the restorative work along with other partners after that.
Thank you. A few more questions here. Scott has asked if you could talk a little bit more about how gender identity and sexual orientation were viewed and understood.
So, my understanding is that there are the two primary genders. We do have gender roles, but they aren't super rigid. So this has even come up more recently with our hunters. We have what's called ceremonial hunters, and I'm not going to go into that. It's kind of it's a little different because everything is about ceremony for us, but we have this designation of ceremonial hunters, and there was a lot of conversation about who could be a ceremonial hunter because we have a lot of rules around what different genders can and can't do and when they can't do it and whatnot. But our elders decided that women specifically have hunted in the past. That's not their primary role, but if and when they need to, they always have. And so they should be allowed to be ceremonial hunters as well. Um, weaponry, there's different rules around some of that too, and women can actually control what how successful hunters are in some ways. There's a anthropological publication. It's been a while, but it's like my wife, or I'm not the hunter, my wife is, I think was the title of it. And it's from one of the tribal communities, I think up in Alaska. And I thought it was pretty interesting because it's not far off from how we view some of those things. And I can't go into a great amount of detail because it's intellectual property, but there are the two main genders. I don't exactly know, and nobody's ever really sat down and talked about it really well, how an additional at least one gender, would be considered, or if it was a spectrum between the two. But I do know that it's acknowledged. Some people have told me, like, if you're a woman and you don't have children, you are in that other gender. And or if you have a preference for marrying someone of the same gender, I guess as you would say today, then you might be in that other, that other area. And I just recently talked with someone about like what's the Paiute word for that because it has fallen out of our lexicon. And I haven't gotten a full answer back, but like within the last 6 months, we've been talking about that because we do have an awareness that um, there are, to me, it's more about what you do than anything else. And I laugh because my dad used to always call me his oldest son because I hunt and I do a lot of boy things or what would be considered boy things. But I am a mom and a grandma and fulfill my current gender roles, I guess. Identify as a woman and the rules I have to follow as such. But yeah, it's an interesting topic. I lost you. I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, there was a child screaming, so I muted
Oh,
myself. So someone else has asked if there are any interpretive centers for visitors to Burns, and are there any plans for increased signage, interpretation about the original occupants in the national forest or on the refuge and throughout the Steens?
there are. And as I say, we've got the talking part done. So we hopefully will be implementing some signage up on the Malheur National Forest this next season. We have an agreement to work on that, and we're working through what the signs are going to say and exactly where they're going to be placed, and all of the rules around that. And then our elders, that's one of the things that they want is more signage. So there's a couple signs on the way out to the refuge by the Narrows. They would like those updated, and so I'm hopeful we'll be able to do that. There's signage at the Sage Hen Rest Area that needs updated. Hines City Park, we currently have a memorandum of agreement with them where we're going to be putting in some signage and some of our plants and talking about their importance. And we're always looking for new opportunities for that. Our website, we just got a grant to update that. So be sure to look, you can Google Burns Paiute Tribe. And right now there isn't much. There's a few things there, including if anyone's looking for work. And there will be, I'm hoping to have a virtual interpretive center so that we can reach out to the world with the things that we want to share. We would also love to have a cultural center here. The downtown building we have, that's what it is slated to be. There's been some funding, issues that have slowed things down, but that's still the plan for it. And then virtual reality, we have two projects that we both have nearly done where people will be able to access one of the creeks that feeds into the Malheur Lake virtually, and Old Camp, which I didn't talk about too much, but it's on West Monroe, and that was the first land holding we had. It was 10 acres that was donated to us. We've recreated Old Camp in the 1930s virtually. So we're looking at different forms of media to be able to help with education and cultural outreach.
That is
Yeah.
very cool. Very cool. A couple more questions. So someone had asked if we might be able to see the slide with this tribal cultural places one more time.
Oh, let's see. This one. Yes.
And then someone had asked if you could describe how land ownership is sort of looked at or determined within the tribe.
So there is no ownership because the land it's its own person. These different places, they all have their own spirit and entity. But there are relationships. So, for instance, in the springtime, there there are major root camps that we would have, and families, extended families, would go and interact with the same areas. So I'd be like, okay, that knoll over there, I know that just throw a name out there, the Kennedy family, always is over there every year. And so they cultivate that area. They have the closest relationship with that area. That doesn't mean that if I were to go over there and be like, hey, can I, help out over here, that they, would say, oh no. But each of our families have areas like that where we frequent, habituate, in, English words, but in our Manipanian, we have a relationship with those places. And I talked a little bit about Puha. That's our energy, and we leave everywhere we go, everything we touch, we leave some of that wherever we are. So our family's Puha is also integrated into those areas and becomes part of that interaction. That's how I understand it. And band wise, we know that bands have different areas, but they also understand that we have blood ties. So I have blood ties most strongly to Fort Bidwell and Owyhee. And over into Idaho. And so people acknowledge that, even though I don't live there.
That was a really awesome explanation of that. Thank you. Um, I hope I did not neglect anyone else's question. I think we got them all. And it is 5:02. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, Diane. And thank you everyone for coming this afternoon. And thank you, Diane, so much for sharing your time and all of your knowledge with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate everyone's time coming on and listening, and your interest, um, both in our history, culture, and also in, the Malheur Refuge area. It's an important place that needs a lot of people's support to continue existing in a good way.
Yes, yes, thank you. And I look forward to our relationship with the tribe and through the refuge. So thank you. And with that, we will say thank you all, and I hope that you'll keep tabs on the monthly newsletter, our mid-month updates for events and programs. The Bird Festival registration is opening on February 14th, so keep your eyes on migratorybirdfestival.org for updates on that. And and thank you. These recordings will continue to live on our YouTube channel, and updates will always be pushed out through social media and in our newsletter and our website. So if you have any questions, comments, you can always reach me at friends@malheurfriends.org. Have a great night.
Well, Pajama. Thank you. See you later.
Thank you.